Without further ado, our next guest was elected Chief of the Champagne-Ajac First Nations in 2014, and he has never looked back. We know Chief Steve not only as his father Elijah, but also because of his father Elijah, I apologize, but because he has a strong voice for his community, a prominent leader in the Yukon for many years as well. Please join me in welcome Steve Smith to the 50th anniversary of Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow speaker series. Good morning, Chief. How are you doing this day? Nope.
Do we have a level?
There you are, buddy. You're live.
Very good, Peter.
Yes. For the ones that may not know who you are as an individual, can you talk a little bit about who you are and the journey that you've been on over the course of time?
Well, normally we do. I learned to do the official, presentation of myself. So ing kachnuchuye aju danathea da shadala shayi kodan. ING gitlameti j danke daklewadi hat klingake ING takina yunin j atta tomai huye amma Sean Clen huye. My name is Steve Smith. I am no longer the chief of the Champagne-Ajac people. I just get to carry the name from now on, but most people, you can call me Steve from now on. I said I am a member of the Gitlamet clan in southern Shoshone. That's the Daklewedi people, Tlingit. My mother comes from this country. This is my country, so I can welcome you. I was chief of Champagne-Ajac for so long that I had to always be respectful coming in here on behalf of Champagne-Ajac, but technically this is my country, the Dakai, our country. Not that I own it, but it owns me. I belong to it, just like we all do. This whole place. I hope that when I leave here that not only the people, but the animals, the fish, those ones flying around will said that I did okay.
Going cheese for that. And as mentioned many times throughout not only these last couple of days, but throughout the last part of, portions of your life, the reflection back and what it meant for you as being Elijah's son, and not only the responsibility and the obligation that comes with that, but what did it mean for you as an individual growing up under that umbrella, if you will, when it came down to responsibility and the role that your father played, not only for your nation, but also for the Yukon in general?
Wow. I don't know if we have enough time.
Okay, that's right. Well, let's start somewhere. Here we are.
Let me take you back. A warm day, sometime late 70s, early 80s. I'm playing around in Hillcrest at, close to where the tennis courts were, Margaret, right behind your guys' house. And I hear plane take off. And I realized that I missed saying fairly well to my dad. I promised Mess I wouldn't do this, but...
It's all right, brother.
And then fast forward 10 or 11 years, and I'm sleeping. 21 years old, and I'm worried about hockey, worried about girls, worried about going to the 60s. And my dad wakes me up, and he gave me a toque. I still have that toque. And just randomly, he's like, I'm leaving now. But it's going to be cold. And he gave me this toque. It's just an ordinary wool toque. He gave it to me, and he was like, yeah, I'm taking off, so we'll see you. And I asked him, because I was getting ready to play. Our season opener was happening for the Whitehorse Huskies, for those of you who've been around Whitehorse for a while. And our season opener was happening on Friday night. I still played with at the time I was playing with the Arrows, the native hockey team. You see it's good that Yancey and Yukon Native Brotherhood gave $300 each. Big money back then, right? But I was playing with the Arrows, and I was going to play Thursday night. That was our sort of season opener for the Arrows, but the next night. And when my dad was walking out the door, I asked, I said, hey, you're gonna be back for the hockey game? He's a huge hockey fan. And it was pretty cool that after when he left us, Yukon Native Hockey Association, I don't know if you know this, but they set aside one seat, his seat in the Takini Arena. Several of his friends still occupy their seats in that spot, but as the years have gone by, the seats have gotten empty. And he said, yeah, no, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there I'll be back Friday, which always meant that he'd probably be back Thursday, because he always under-promised and over-performed. And that was it. He walked out. He left. For many years, I didn't want my kids to go through that. When Judy talks about Rick, when Bill and Adeline talk about William, my cousin Ogie, right? Peter. My brother Stevie Allen. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
It's all right, brother.
It's hard. Because as a kid, you don't really have control. Thank you. As a kid, you don't have control, right? You're just there. Mom and dad have to go and do their job. And as a woman, my mom did not take her leadership role until after my dad passed away. But she was the keel to our family. And when I was thinking about starting my own family, my dad pulled me aside and he said, I'll give you one little bit of word of advice. When you start building your family, know this. This is your home, but it's her house. He understood that we as men are supposed to work every day for the needs of our wives and our children. Because our wives are so important in making it our home. The place where all of my strength comes from. Comes from my wife. And I'm honored to say, I'm glad to say I can do a little bit of bragging here. After we lost Jean Gleason, who was a very prominent leader within our community, I was four-wheeling around my place and I said, we need to have an award for the mums who take their kids every day to hockey, who get up at 4 a.m., make breakfast and drive, sit outside like my mom did, slept. She took her blanket with her and slept outside, waiting for my brother Dwayne to finish his game and me to finish my game. And so I petitioned the Yukon Native Hockey Association to build the Hockey Mum Award. And that was in honor of Jean Gleason, because she was one of my hockey mums. One of my best buddies is Dwayne Gleason. So I know may think that I'm kind of rambling here, but that I wanted to give you something other than just my dad pulled me aside and he said, this is how you talk to this guy and this is how you do it. To me, he was my dad. He was somebody that it destroyed me when he left. I had a big hole in my heart because he dragged me around the territory. I know Percy. I know Mabel. I know them because I stayed at their house. My dad would be working and the Henry family took me in. I know Danny Joe. I know Betty Joe. George and Eva Billy. Dixon Lutz. I know these people because when my dad had to go to that community, they were the ones who took care of me. My friend Jimmy Hager, you see him around here. I played with him when I was in Pelly while my dad had to work. He never told me really what was going on. He never told me that I had to do this one day. But he told me, he said, you know what? This is somebody's country. You be respectful of them. You show them respect by, if they offer you food, you take it from them. You're no better than they are. And so that kind of resonated with me. And that's why I say at the end of my life, I hope that, that it's a good feeling that people have. Not that I'm planning on kicking off anytime soon, but, as we talk about at Champanaisiac, the number one goal for our nation when I left was to create Dun Show Fun. Good people. They could be smart, they could be rich, they could be poor, but at the end of the day, they would be good people. That's what we want. And I think that's what our old ones spoke about when they talked at these meetings. The one thing I did learn posthumously about how that approach happened was about talking and being able to learn a little bit about what Elijah Smith was about, why he was so adverse to any kind of conflict. Well, because he lived it. And so, he was there seeing kids blown apart, picking up their bodies, their body parts. And he said, we should never go to the point where we're to this. There's always room for us to talk a little bit more. And back in the 70s, there was some pretty radical done. And there were a lot of people in our community even that were like, no, what are you guys doing talking to these people? We should be just taking back the land. But he lived the experience of what that means if you put weapons into the room and into the conversation. And so those are some of the things that I took from him. I didn't know. I also learned a little bit of how to protect myself in the game. I wasn't a dirty player, but I knew how to protect myself. That was Elijah Smith taught that. He taught me how to go into the corner if somebody was he knew somebody was going to check you, and how to do that. He also told me that, time waits for nobody. When you say you have to be there, you have to be there. And so, sorry,
That's all right.
Long answer to your short question.
That's right. And I've worked with you for a number of years, so I'm well prepared for your long answers as well. So Chief and I had done our first interview together this morning on the Currents. So when they first asked me to do a joint interview with Chief Steve, I'm like, 20 minutes, when do I get to speak here? So all jokes aside, Chief, just in regards to your personal journey, obviously you talked about the experience growing up in it. When did it really resonate with you, the responsibility and the sense of responsibility, not only of the work that your father and others had done, but to you as an individual?
It's kind of crazy. You're gonna sometimes I get a little on the sappy side of things, right? But I'll tell you, in 1994 was the election, the election before I joined, and about 1995, this was after the election of the Champagnat Chief Council, Chief Burkle, James Allen was a councillor, Harry Smith, there was quite a few. Trish George Smith was a youth councillor. And I was watching Lion King. No lie, I was watching Lion King with my kids. And this gets me emotional. Even when I watch the show today, it gets me emotional because through the show, it was actually my dad. And like I said, I never really got over the sharp pain of losing my dad until probably I was in my 30s. So 9 or 10 years after he left. Every time I think about him, and that's why I try not to refer to him too much. Because like I said, he filled a big part of my heart, more than anybody else. And I think that's why he had to leave, was because I had no room, right, for anybody else here. Mm. And I had a son coming. And so that's why it had to happen. But anyway, back to the Lion King. Do you know the scene where Simba is off on his own? He's having Hakuna Matata, he's singing the song, eating bugs, not really eating meat because his buddies didn't want him to eat meat. And the monkey finds him, Rafiki, and he hits him on the head, and he's like, I know where your dad is. So you got to think about this. 4 years after my dad is gone. And he takes him to that pool, and he points at it, and he says, he's right there. Look. And then the scene comes about where his dad shows up. And what happens is his dad starts speaking to him from the cloud. And he said, you are my son. You have to take your place. And now's the time. Now's the time to take your place. And that is, the reason why I ran was because not only my dad, but my grandma told me this, my mom told me this, all of my older cousins and older brothers and sisters, and our chief, Paul Burkle, he told me that. It's time for you now. But it started with that crazy cartoon. And I realized then that, what we are gifted, what I was gifted more than anything else. He didn't die with a lot of money. He didn't die with a lot of things to hand over to me. And all of his personal things have to go to my cousin because I'm not his clan. But what he gave me the most was this sense of responsibility that I think is the cornerstone to who our people are. We do things. Southern Shoshone way, we say, do chin shi. I hope I said it the right way. Do chin shi because we got to do it. The most honorable job that we can have is when, for me, I'm on the wolf side. When the Kudjet phone me or the Crow people phone me and ask me to help them with their family. It's the most honorable job I've had. And being who I was has been it's the best job that I've ever had in my sort of short life. I'm not that old yet, but getting up there. When your younger cousins turn 50, happy birthday, Georgianne, Porge. you're starting to crest the hill a little bit, but that's kind of, I think, what he gave me the most was a real sense that, do change because you got to do it. That's every leader that I see comes from that one thing. And it's the same for almost all of us. Our language might be a little bit different, but we have that same responsibility.
Sheesh. And looking back over the last 50 years, Chief, from the 1973 delegation to the decades of negotiations, agreements, challenges, and achievements, what was the biggest challenges our leaders had to overcome at that point?
The ability to speak, I think, publicly, and really the double sword of our own people not wanting us because they didn't know to do what we had to get done, and of course the abject racism that we faced. You got to think, a lot of the people that Judy and them had to go up against, my brother Mike, Dave, Joe, didn't even think of us as real humans. We were soulless to them, heathens. Yet we prayed to the same kind of deity, one creator. We're monotheistic. We don't worship the sun, the moon, and the stars, right? We're thankful for them. But how they thought of us as being less than. Who are these people? They can't even be saved by Christianity in reality, right? They're savages. Look at what they do. They give away all their wealth. How can we do that? Right? So that's what we had to face. And we talk about this, and you can have this glory-filled kind of vision of back then. But when somebody cornered you, and I watched my dad do this a lot of times, I can say a lot of names out there, Guchun names, who cornered him at T&Ds or in the mall. What the hell do you Indians think you're doing? I'm not giving you my land. You guys just go back to the reserve. Go back down to Kwalendon and just stay there. You should be thankful that we give you a house. You should be thankful that we give you land for free. Now you want all this other stuff? That's what I witnessed, right? And I think for me, it's testament to who we are. All of this is easy because of Du Chin Shi. Because we knew our people were relying on us. Those leaders knew. They had all the weight of their community, and they especially had the weight of their partner, who stayed home, who made sure that even though they're crying, they got bacon and eggs, right? That made sure that we were taken care of, and we were still loved in a community that understood us, and made that all easier anyway.
For sure. And even though we still face many challenges and barriers today, how much has our life changed as Yukon First Nations since the 70s?
Well, you'll have to ask somebody a little bit older than me, because in the 1970s, there was only one thing that mattered to Steve Smith, and that was Star Wars, right? Through the 80s, it's interesting though, and I had a dad who didn't really attend residential school, who his dad was a pretty strong person. Tlingit man was strong. And my dad was those of you who were around when, you were young people, when he was taking you in and making you do work, he's pretty straightforward individual. Right? And strong, his, as they would say, his word is oak, right? He was strong. And so to have that as your background, it's amazing today to see what we've been able to grow into. We have lawyers, doctors, nurses. We have so many. I think we have too many lawyers, but that's another point. But you know what? Like, we're everything. We have people in the film industry. We have people in the news industry. Our people are all over. And one of the greatest things that I've seen grow, and I don't see too many of them in here today, but I see some of the matriarchs who ensured this, is back in the late 80s and early 90s, I as a person was like, who's going to sew my mucklucks after my mom is gone? Who's going to sew all these things? I was on the ins with some of the best sewers in southern Yukon, right? Sadie Brown, Annie Smith, Betty Derbyshire Titus. So, right? Irene Smith, my own mom. And I watched, and for all of you, I come to this realization, those ladies were like, the vast majority of business people in our communities were women. They actually carried on a business. They procured raw materials, they made them into finished products, and they sold them in the market, right? So it was our women who did this. I was a wealthy guy when I went on hockey trips, because my dad would give me like $100 to feed me, right? He was a little conservative. I would say cheap, but conservative. But what my mom would do is she would go, okay, well, here, I'll give you a pair of mitts and I'll give you a fur hat. You sell that and then you can have the money. That's what she would do. And for her, it didn't seem like much, but like, I want to tell you, I was a high roller on hockey trips, right? First thing I would do is I'd put on my own stuff that she had for me, my mucklucks, my mitts and stuff, and I'd see a kuchan, and they would like, oh boy, that's sure beautiful. I'm like, yeah, would you like to buy something? And I'm like, oh, okay. So they would hand it over. So I want to get back to that, like how impressed I am. My niece came to me like 7 years ago now, I think, crying because she had the most amazing opportunity and she was so overwhelmed that it overwhelmed her. Like, she's like, what do I do? Everybody wants my granny hanky, right? And it was like, well, this is how we can work this stuff out, right? But to see our young, especially our young women, now there's a lot of young men that are doing this as well, but a lot of our young women, to see that just so recaptured. This is sewn by, I don't know how you say young Agajel, but these are young women who sewed this, my chief's medallion, for me, right? And it's a testament to, there was a pretty thin bench after you talk about the Annie Smiths and the Betty Derbyshires, right? It's pretty thin. A few of you kept it, right? But now, do you feel as good as me to see how many of our young people actually, and it's not just a pastime. My niece feeds and clothes her family on her income from carrying on a traditional way of life. And I think that could be the best answer to your question.
I thank you for that. And just to wrap things up, Chief, what lessons from the past 50 years that we can use now into the next 50?
I think what we have to do is try to expose more and more of our young people to the aspects of like their responsibility. In so much of our success, we've also lessened the responsibility back. And you know, there's not too much that you can be too fearful of, because when they come to that age, as long as we love our kids and take time for them, they're always going to come back to who they are. Dun show fun, good people. We all kind of did that route. We have to. That's just the way us Indians are, right? Got to be a little crazy once in a while. But I think at the end of the day, like, I'm not really actually all that concerned. I'm not concerned that my grandson will grow up not knowing who he is. Right? I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned. I see all these young people over there. Wow. And I want to make one final note. Remember Indian days? We think back, it was a beautiful time, and I commend you, Grand Chief, for bringing that back. I was driving in on Friday or Saturday morning. Got to talk to somebody else again, but I was going to go to the hand games. I was like, hand games has replaced our Indian days, right? What were Indian days? There was the blind man's walk.
Yeah.
A three-legged race, which never get into a three-legged race as Chadelle's partner.
Tug of war.
Tug of war. What were those? Good chun, right? We grabbed the games and we learned in school or where else, and we did those games. So we were getting together, which was a great thing, but we were actually celebrating somebody else's culture when we were doing those games. Today, our young people, I think they're going to be way more stronger than we are, because our traditional game has, like, the power, right? You be sure that the Prime Minister had to walk through that room yesterday, right? Because the power. How many of you left that place drained to the nines or energized beyond all, right? And that's the power of our young people. And if we, like, having hand games is now replaced for me what Indian days were, right? Which is us coming together and celebrating and seeing one another. And that, I think that, to me, is such a big and powerful statement. And it's one that I little reticent about sometimes. But I'm like, thought about it and was like, no, that's a vehicle to which our people will come here 50 years from now, when many of us are gone, right? Unless those UFOs start, like, giving us special medicine, we're gonna be okay. I think even stronger.
Colonel Chief, I did really appreciate your leadership, your open and honest discussion today, and just want to thank you very much for being a part of our speaker series. So, Chief Steve Smith, folks.